Hey, happy 2026. We're back, sharp as ever. And I just want to, touch on one thing here before we start the show. And that is, as you can see by my name thing down there, I have finally retired from my job. And there's the card I got from work, nice and big, signed by a lot of people. So it's only been a few days, but so far I'm really digging it. I really like it. But now let's get these guys in here. Let's get the professor, Mr. Dave Podner. Hello, David.
Hello, Greg. Congratulations on the retirement.
Thank you, sir. And we'll get Dwight in here right away. Hey, Dwight.
Hey, Greg. Hey, Dave. Congratulations, Greg.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, I'm going to enjoy it, and I don't know what else I could say. I put 41 years into my job, and I think it's about time. 41 years is enough, right? So
keep us informed of your honeydew list. We want to see that thing growing.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I knocked a few things off it already.
Yeah, good.
So I've got a lozenge in my mouth here because my voice is getting a little raspy. So I'm trying to nurse it as best I can. I'm getting over a cold, and I think basically we all are, guys? It's that time of year. So I'm just going to put my phone on Do Not Disturb. There we go. So we're going to talk about something that, bless him, Will Newcomb is in the chat. And this is something that he brought up a while ago. And we thought, we should do a show on this. And it has everything to do with, the over-sharpening of photos from the Apple camera. So let's see, I'm going to be going to my notes because, as you know, we're a little rusty. At least I am. What causes Apple photos to be over-sharpened? Now, okay, some people might not really notice this, but when you start looking at pictures from your iPhone, especially taken from the Apple camera, when you start looking at them on the big screen, and I'll speak for myself, the older I get, the harder my eyes are to see the small things. Especially iPhone photos on a small screen like the iPhone, even though I use the big phone. But I can see better on my Mac. I'm doing more editing on my Mac and all that stuff. So I tend to see where these pictures are over-sharpened. And the root cause is Apple's pipeline. Apple prioritizes clarity and immediacy over subtlety, and that leads to aggressive sharpening and, local contrast. It's especially noticeable, not just to photographers, but on, like I said, larger screens. So when you look at an iPhone or looking at a picture on your phone screen, okay, yeah, it's there. When you see it on, say, like an iPad screen, you go, oh, well, I don't know. Maybe it does look a little over-sharpened. But when you see it on a big computer screen, like a 24-inch, 27-inch, even my 21.5-inch iMac screen, oh no, mine's 24, sorry. You start thinking, okay, now it's really showing up. And, when you've been doing photography for a bunch of years, you start thinking, you're always wanting to know how to improve it. So, this whole over-sharpening thing is kind of getting to a lot of people. And I don't know, Dave, has it really bothered you much? Like, you don't...
Honestly, it really has not bothered me that much, mainly because I have like the only large screen I have is my work monitors, which they're decently high resolution, but they're not like Apple resolution, And it's working off of a Dell laptop, so we're not talking the greatest graphic drivers. So most of the time when I'm looking at images, I'm looking at them on my phone. And like you said, when you're looking at them on your phone, especially as those of us, and I think we're all here, who wear glasses and we're getting older, I really have to zoom in on the images. So I have to okay, I see this image, I see that image, I feel a difference, but unless it's truly egregious, like how HDR was at one time where you were like, "Ugh." Yeah, I can see the shadows aren't completely blacked out, but it looks like a bad painting where
Mhm.
HDR was at one time. You see people over sharpen it looking like it's almost like a carving. The edges are so sharp sometimes.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
unless it gets like that, I need to really pixel peep,
Mhm.
honestly, to see it. And like you said, if I was looking at my own pictures on a large screen, high resolution, not in social media, because we know Facebook, Instagram,
Yeah.
Threads, Blue Sky, they always mess up your resolution enough where I the resolution knocked down by the social media platforms, especially if you're looking on a small screen, will make it where you can't tell the difference.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
something that I've experienced also where I've done edits on things and to me, it looks great. The whites look white, the blacks look black. I throw it on like Facebook or I throw it somewhere else to share it and it looks dull. And it's because the Apple HDR on an HDR screen looks great, but Facebook just messes it up and it's like, this is not what I see. I
Yeah.
even checked with people. They said, you see that image there? Yeah. Do you see that image? Same image. It
Mhm.
doesn't even look the same, and I can't fix it. So, honestly, the over sharpening doesn't really bother me a lot, but I do notice it.
Yeah. So, we're gonna do this episode here, and we're gonna address a few things, but the next episode, we're gonna take a little further, and by that, I mean, we're gonna look at, third-party apps and things like that, so, spoiler alert, and ways that you can get ways that you could deal with this over-sharpening look that these phones are doing. So, I'm gonna go over a few quick notes here real quick. I'll probably even skip some of them because Dwight is gonna kinda take the lead on this because he's noticing this more than we are, and we got of course, we got some sample images to show. So, if you're just joining the podcast for the first time, the audio version, when we talk about an image, you'll be able to look at it on your phone screen in the podcast app, and you'll be able to see it. So, I think I mentioned that Apple optimizes for impact, like, for subtlety, not for subtlety. They tune their image pipeline for instant visual punch and for small screens, like you mentioned, Dave, social media. And, so that means, strong edge detection and high micro contrast. But we see the halos around the edges. Noise reduction, it creates the need for sharpening. So, because Apple takes a number of pictures to make one picture. They don't take a picture, they build it, with all their different things in the processing pipeline, in the image pipeline. And so noise reduction, it gets applied and it softens detail. So sharpening is added back in, and then that's when you get the edges, the edges get these halos or a crunchy look. Deep fusion is another thing that causes this look, it gets a little aggressive when it enhances what it thinks is detail, but it doesn't always know the difference between detail and texture. So it just applies itself to everything, and that's why sometimes you'll get, fabrics will look gritty and things like that. So Pro Raw helps, and as we're going to look at some of these images here, shooting in Pro Raw, it reduces some of the sharpening, but it doesn't get rid of it. It gives you more control over the editing process. That's been a selling point of Pro Raw from day one, and so you get a little smoother tonal transitions than you would in a JPEG. And let's see, natural edges to a point and more control in post. But if you want to get the best quality from the sensor, shoot Bay or RAW and edit the image accordingly or process it. Or you can consider a third-party app to really break down that barrier. So we're going to touch on one of these apps today, but we're going to look at more on the next episode. So that's kind of the reason behind these. Now I could put these notes away because I don't need them anymore. But that's kind of the reason behind this over sharpening and over processing stuff that we see with the Apple camera. Most people probably don't even notice it, which is fine. And if you don't, that's great. But as soon as you start looking at images on a bigger screen, then, that's when you start to see it, like I said. So, we're gonna show some pictures here real quick.
Greg, before
Yep.
you get going, something right before the podcast that kind of popped in my head. I wonder if Apple does this not only because the average, like we said, Apple's a 90-90 company. They're doing 90%, for 9% of the people, 90% of the time, it's good enough for them. So I kind of also wonder, are they doing this partially for the reviewers? Because every time you see a new phone come out and there's people taking camera, doing the camera review, one of the things they always do is try the zoom lens, and they try to, blow it up as big as they can so they can see if, oh, you can see we took this picture on the Samsung and you can actually read the sign from, 300 yards away. And the Apple one's kind of blurry and blotchy. We can't actually read that. And I kind of wonder, did Apple eventually say, okay, we're getting dinged in these reviews. Can we just tighten it up and make it a little bit clearer and the little details? And then they won't at least go us on that anymore. Just something that kind of popped in my head was like,
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that anything in particular is done for reviewers or for reviews even, but, they just want instant gratification when you take a picture, right? They want their customers to be happy as soon as they take that picture, and, I mean, in all honesty, when you take a picture and you look at it on your phone, yeah, it looks great, but, I think it was maybe Dwight, you said something about we're the outliers on the edge of this town or something like that, that are.
Yeah, I think Greg and Dave, I think you guys hit it on the head. They've designed these things for 98, 99% of the population that, they're probably
Yeah.
not printing their photos or just going right to social media. They, in theory, don't have to edit. Personally, I've kind of, we're all on a journey, right? And I totally get the folks that, you know, what they're getting with Pro Raw and all these other, settings and stuff in the native camera app. I get it. I mean, it's fine for a lot of people, but my editing transition to the big screen very early in my journey, and I can now see a picture, a photo, and I can say that's an iPhone photo because to me it looks very silvery, just looks silvery. There's no the shadows have all been lifted, everything's just kinda grainy everywhere. So I've kinda trained myself to pretty much, detect what is an iPhone photograph. Now, where I am personally on this is I am rarely using the native camera app anymore, and I've done a real deep dive into third-party apps that are committed to determining ways to perhaps use Apple's pipeline to a certain extent and then just back little pieces out of it, just to make it look a little bit more natural. And, we can talk about that on, maybe later on the next episode. But and then, Pro Raw, excuse me, at night, for me, 48 megapixels at night, everything's just really muddy. So I think, Pro Raw at night is good, at 12 megapixels. During the day, I just see muddy details, with the processing. And let's face it, our cameras all have very small sensors, right? So, we can shoot in Bayer RAW. There's limitations with that, based on, the lighting conditions outside. So, it is a challenge, but for me, I've almost entirely moved away from the the native application, which I never really thought I'd do. I think, personally at this point, I think Apple should recognize that there's some people out there, they profess on the video side, how, professional they are. I like to see some
Mhm.
of the, those capabilities come over to the photo side and just, be able to dial back on some of that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, and I heard an interesting thing on Mac Break Weekly recently where they were talking about they were talking about the iPhone, like the foldable iPhone that's supposed to be coming out probably this year, and, they wondered what they're gonna call it, and should it be called a Pro? And one of the things they said that really caught my attention, and I think they're kinda right, is in some ways, the iPhone Pro phones means professional, but in other ways, the iPhone Pro phone just means really, really nice, high-end type of thing. So, I think it maybe just depends on the context of what they're referring to when they say pro. Scott Baker says 2 times more pro. Yeah, isn't that Apple marketing logic there? So, the images we're gonna look at here, the first one, I got a couple that I'm gonna show first of my own, and then Dwight's got a bunch here that we're gonna look at. And Dave, by all means, like, be the inquisitive student or whatever you wanna call it, because I know you
Greg,
don't,
we should probably mention that, we have kind of a lower resolution kind
Oh,
of
yeah.
deal here. So please keep
Yeah,
that in mind as we go through this. We can see it on our screens. It may not be apparent here.
but when the show notes do hit our Facebook page, you'll be able to get a better look at them, folks, when you listen along with the live podcast or the audio podcast. And so I've got them so that hopefully they kinda show up on YouTube, but I guess that remains to be seen. But the first one is, so back in the fall, I shot these aspen trees in the fall, and it was the best picture I took probably in my life, at least my favorite from last year. So I was out for a drive looking around for winter scenes to take a picture of, and I thought, "You know what? I'm close to them. I'm gonna go get them again." So this was the No Fusion Pro Raw. So No Fusion is the camera app that we're gonna be discussing today because of what it's capable of, and Dwight will get into that a little better than I can. But, it's gonna be hard to see, but this is the No Fusion Pro Raw, and what it does is it cuts back on some of the imaging pipeline. And then this is a No Fusion HEIF Plus, I think it's called. And what it does is you can control how much sharpening and all that stuff it goes on with it. So I zoomed in to 100% and took a screenshot. And this is the Pro Raw from No Fusion. And if you can, hopefully you can see it, but you can see that there is a bit of haloing on the edges of these little twigs and things. But when I go to the HEIF Plus version, everything softens right down because I've got sharpening turned off or set to low, I guess. And that is the big difference between, what the Apple camera does and what some of these third-party apps can do. And the people behind these apps, the developers, are just genius. I'm just really loving what they're doing. So,
Yeah, some people might look at that, Greg, and say, "Hey, that looks a little soft right now," but I
yeah,
think it's just a good example of how you can back off the sharpening piece out of the Pro Raw. That can be adjusted to low, medium, or high,
yeah.
but this is a good representation on how you can back that out of the Pro Raw pipeline.
But and also, and that is very true, and also it gives me control over how much sharpening it does get in the end,
Mhm.
right? So, and that's I've always tried to take control of my own sharpening, like when I was doing my DSLR stuff years ago. Sharpening was always the last thing I did before I outputted the image, 'cause your sharpening is gonna be different than for print than it is for something on a screen. So, this is a Pro Raw file that you took, Dwight.
Yeah, so this cactus was planted apparently by the first property owner in our state that actually was a woman, which is pretty interesting story, but that's a whole other podcast. This is Pro Raw, so all of the shadows have been lifted, right? There's no true shadow representation here. That is not what I'm seeing when I'm looking at this. The sun's behind it, but the Pro Raw brought those shadows out, and you can't really see it on this one. I mean, it looks soft, around the rocks, but everything down there is really crunchy along the trail. And maybe when
Mhm.
we put it in the Facebook group, it'll be more apparent. But yeah, if you wanna go to my Pro Raw one, Greg, you can kinda see the difference.
Like, this is the No Fusion Pro Raw version, right?
That's the No, that was actually a Bayer Raw. I did
Oh,
not do
right,
the No
right,
Fusion on this one.
right, that's right.
Um, I'm not overly happy with this edit, but it is true representation of how the shadows looked when I in the scene.
Mhm.
So if you go back again, Greg, to that other one,
Yeah,
shadows have been lifted way too much out of this thing, and then, you go to the next one, that was how it looked.
yeah. Yeah, because the sun, this thing is basically backlit.
Yeah,
So that area down at the bottom at where the ground is, it should be in dark shadow. It shouldn't be lit up like it was in the Pro Raw version.
correct.
So, but the other thing that to take note here, and it's gonna be hard to see on the screen, obviously, but is the sharpness of the, things like the leafless branches in the background there. You know, I can see a bit of a difference there. You could almost tell when they've been over sharpened and when they're not. But so then I think what is next? I think it's the sunset. So this was the Pro Raw sunset,
Mhm.
and so I'll let you describe what you've got going on here.
Yeah, so this is straight out of camera, Pro Raw, no edits. The water is very crunchy, and it's not apparent here just based on the resolution, but it was very crunchy. So I wanted to kinda compare and contrast that with the No Fusion app and a raw edit. I don't know if you have all 3 of those in there, Greg.
This is the No Fusion low sharpening version.
Okay, yeah, so this is the No Fusion with let's see, that I think that my settings on that one were low sharpness, high latitude, which controls how well a photo preserves highlights and shadows, and then the saturation compensation was at mid.
Mhm.
So, my goal was just to get this thing a little bit more, looking a little bit more soft and natural than it did in the Pro Raw version.
Yeah, and where it's most evident for me is where right in the background there where the landscape comes down towards the water and into the orange sky, and it's not as the haloing is just not there as much as it was in the Pro Raw file. So if I go back to the original Pro Raw file, I mean, I see it. I see it's called haloing, but it's almost like I don't know the best way to describe it, but it's just not a good transition between land and sky in this case.
Yeah,
You
and I'm
know,
not saying, for those that like to shoot in Pro Raw that you can't go into Lightroom and reduce the tone mapping and then build your tonal values back up to an acceptable range. I mean, some of those look awesome.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, just out of camera, it just did not look good to me.
Yeah. So I did the same here with these ones. So this is a really zoomed in version of the Pro Raw file, the first
Mhm.
one, and I mean I'm zoomed in quite a bit, so you could almost see it start to pixelate. But I mean it's so evident in where the earth meets the sky there. The the sharpening that just to me is just over sharpened. It's just overdone to the point where it's got that haloing effect. And then when I go to the no fusion version, you can see it softens up.
Yeah.
Now I've got this zoomed in beyond 100% just so that folks could see it on their screen on YouTube. But, again, wait when the show notes come out on Wednesday, you'll be able to get a better look at these, and w
Yeah,
you'll be
my
able to see what
and
we're
my
talking about
focus
a little
was
better.
the water. You can already see that the water's softer,
Oh, yeah,
but
for sure.
but it doesn't look good because 'cause we're zoomed in real far, but I think once we
Yeah,
put the photos up in the group,
yeah,
they'll look better, but yeah.
yeah. So so that is all the pictures I got ready. It's been a bit of a hectic day, so I couldn't really get everything ready that we had put in our folder. So let's get to the man himself. Let's see what Will Newcomb has to say. Shadow's not natural. No photo is natural. enter the film sensor, or either the film or the sensor includes some processing and even Ansel edited everything. Well, that is true, Will. You know, even even a raw file, a bare raw file is processed when you look at the preview on your screen because you're looking at a JPEG preview. And, you know, Ansel Adams, he not just edited everything, he edited them numerous times. I have a book about him that talks about some of his best images, and, I mean, he would do an edit, and when we say edit, we mean like in the dark room, working with the film and the paper and in the water and all that stuff. I don't even know how it all works because it's something I never got into, but he would do, a lot of dodging and burning and stuff like that to make his images what they were, till he got what he wanted. And it's the same with us with digital photography. Like even with you, Dave, when you're doing like your happy accident you posted a couple days ago, I thought that was really cool. That was a really cool
Mhm.
abstract image, and I don't even know what it was to begin with, and I don't think you do either.
No, I have no idea. All I know was I looked at it, and I actually had to look at the info to see, did I take it or did Ruth take it?
Yeah,
And
or maybe it was one
honestly,
of the dogs.
and which camera? Because it was so abstract. It was like, I still have no idea what it was, but I
Yeah,
figured
but
it had interesting color and I ran with it.
yeah, and that's the thing is, when you edited it, things started coming into your mind and how you
Mhm.
might have wanted it to look and all that stuff, and, it came out pretty cool, I thought. And by all means, send it to me and I'll put it in the show notes just because now that we mentioned it, it's I think it's pretty cool. But
Yeah, I mean, back to Will's comment here,
Yeah.
I see where he's coming from, but I want personally well, this is shot in bare raw, so it was representative of the scene, right? There's no
Mhm.
processing done to it. I don't want my shadows artificially messed with to start with.
Mhm,
I want
mhm.
control over that, and that's my whole argument, I think, on this thing. Since that was could I lift those shadows in post more than what you saw there? Yes. I mean, that I could dodge those, I can do a tonal adjustment, but I wanna start with a natural place to do my tonal adjustments. I don't want some computational photography saying, "Hey, let's get this thing ready for social media." I tend to be a little bit trying to be a little bit more pure. Again, this is my journey.
Mhm.
Everybody else is gonna have a
Mhm.
different path, and
Yep.
I respect everybody's decision and the way they wanna go. And Will, on the, iPad, the the the, you're not gonna see anything, I don't think, on this feed
Yeah.
with the
Yeah.
resolution, so
Yeah, like this YouTube feed is 720. It's not even 1080 because it's in the top right corner, you say powered by StreamYard, and for us to put this on in high definition, it would cost an arm and a leg, and I'm not prepared to pay that,
No.
you know,
And for the
it's
most part, it's
way too
not
expensive.
necessary. It's really not
Exactly.
necessary.
Yeah,
it's not like you
exactly.
can work overtime anymore.
Well, this is true.
And Dwight, and this is, and I'll springboard off you. It, it's really what you are aiming
Mhm.
for and what you are happy with the output. And like you said, you want to have a lot more control and start with me. I don't want maybe not use natural, but neutral, where this is as close as possible to what your eye would see, not necessarily us fixing the reality.
Yeah, I mean, we're limited by our sensor, so
Yeah.
when I'm shooting in RAW, I wanna start with what the sensor sees, and then I can build my tonal values up from there, and so essentially developing it. I
Yeah.
really
Mhm.
I don't want pre-development done to my photos. Now, Greg, if you're ready to talk about no fusion,
Well,
I
Yeah.
l
we'll just touch on this
yeah,
latest comment from Will real
Mhm.
quick. So, with regards to shadows, so when a new phone comes out, reviewers check the cameras, which they always do because the cameras are probably one of the main reasons why people get the phone that they get.
Hmm.
One of the things they all check out is shadow detail. And I think that's because, like, way back when I was doing my Canon photography, prior to 2016, I was always taught or I learned that you got to expose to the right because you can't back then, sensors are different now, I think, because you can pull the shadows out of an image so much easier than you can recover
Wow.
highlights. Like, highlights, once they're gone, but you can have shadows that are so black, you can get the detail out of them, and especially with the DNG file.
Hmm.
It's just crazy, and yeah, Will
All my
says most.
shadow information on that photo that I took in RAW
Yep,
is there. So,
yeah,
to Will's point, I could bring that out, but for that photo, I just wanted to illustrate what the eye saw.
yeah,
That detail's there.
yeah, for sure. And most often, Will says, most often I do not want what my eyes see. I'm not sure how when he means I
I
wasn't
think he
something
meant I
better,
want something
often with
better.
Yeah.
greater impact. He wants something better, often with greater impact.
Yeah. And
And yeah,
yeah, I mean, I will also say that there are times when I take a photo and I want to have the photo show not necessarily reality, but the impact of when I saw the landscape or saw the image or saw what was happening in my head that made me say, oh, wow, I'm going to stop and take a photo of that because a lot of times it's the wow factor, the impact of when I see something, and I want to express that in the photo. And lots of times it's not what I see, it's what I feel. And a lot like with Will saying about impact, there are times when like sunset photos, I I don't want it to be natural because just having it as a plain as possible photo doesn't get the same impact as what I felt when I saw it. And honestly, if we're gonna blame someone, let's blame Samsung because back in the day, remember, iPhones were the more natural photos and Samsung's looked more impactful and they got the more wow factor because they were artificially boosted. But that got people's attention. And I think that's another reason why Apple kind of boosted up a little bit more than straight no, straight like a straight natural shot. Because like Dwight said, like Will said, they're competing with their competitors and they're competing with what reviewers see and what they find impactful.
yeah, 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 that's true. Like, it's photography is a subjective thing too, right? So we're subjectively looking at this from the angle that we're finding things are too sharp. And so with this episode, we're going to focus, no pun intended, on one app called No Fusion. And I think Dwight, I think you brought this to our attention initially, like a few months ago, if I remember correctly. But
Yeah. So, I mean, some of you that have been following me, and I've been with this podcast for I think over a year now. I'm big into the editing process. I mean, it's as much of a hobby for me as it is taking photos. No Fusion kind of piqued my interest. I've had it on my phone for a long time, but No Fusion is an opportunity for us with the proper settings to utilize Apple's ProRAW pipeline and to be able to output that to an HEIF plus that would include modifications to the ProRAW pipeline. As I'd mentioned before, you can back the sharpening out. You can adjust the saturation compensation and a couple other things. So what I posted a side of a building in today on the podcast group in Facebook. And I was looking at that earlier, and I think it's actually the most natural looking photo I've ever taken. Excuse me. And the crazy thing about it is I did not touch a thing in post. other than cropping, and I think I cleaned one little spot up, and that was it. It's one of the most natural looking photos I've ever taken. It kinda blew my mind. You guys can see it in the group. Not a spectacular landmark or anything like that, just looking at it. So, there's a couple ways that you can utilize this app. So, you can shoot in the HEIF plus format with the ProRAW pipeline, and it'll output an HEIF plus image with the adjustments done to the ProRAW pipeline in the background. So for me, backing out of some of that sharpness and saturation compensation and a couple other things, this app, at least from I think, from the Reddit forum, and then Alex Armitage also did a
Mhm.
big comparison, between different apps. And he came to the same conclusion that I did, is that it preserves shadow details way better than in any of the other apps that he tested. So I'm actually kind of blown away. Am I done editing? I don't know. Right. I mean, I've got an HEIF plus file, and it's maintaining the 48 megapixel resolution with those changes to it.
And they say that
Blown
their
my mind.
HEIF plus is basically their Pro Raw file, but just with some of the things back down, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So if you take that photo out of your photo library, and you know how you export it unmodified,
Mhm.
you're going to get the HEIC photo with the changes that were done to it, and then it'll also output the raw file. So you'll have a pro raw file with it. So it's really, really interesting. I'm very kind of in the middle of this journey trying to figure it out. It's kind of complicated, but if you go into the Reddit forums, you'll see some just beautiful, unbelievable photography that's happening with this app.
Yeah, and Will says, editing is the opportunity to get out what you want, and No Fusion gives you that, gives you what you want, which is great.
Yeah, which is kind of amazing to me because historically I've been shooting in RAW for the most part, and for anything to look decent, you have to develop it. But now I'm starting to take photos that look natural, and you drop them into Lightroom, and you've got the nice bell curve. Nothing's clipping, nothing's I mean, the histogram looks awesome.
Yeah,
Colors look great. Of course, you can do something in post, but talk about an opportunity to have something that's minimally worked on and ready to go.
yeah. Hey, Teresa's in the house. Nice to see you here, Teresa. She says, what I find frustrating is that Apple ProRAW is partly processed by Apple. Yes, as that is true. And to get a totally raw file, you need to use a third-party app, but Apple limits them to 12 megapixels instead of 48. Yeah, that's kind of been a complaint of mine for a while now. Why can't we have a 48 megapixel bare raw file? You know, S and Dwight kinda touched on this earlier. One little bit of a workaround, and it's not 100%, but it's not bad, is that you can take a ProRAW file into Lightroom or Lightroom Mobile even, and you can go to the profiles section, like, okay, I'll talk the mobile side here. You can go to the profiles section, and then under when you got Apple ProRAW selected, you can dial that slider down, and that takes a lot of that stuff. It reduces that tone mapping a fair bit. I don't believe it's 100%, but it's a fair bit where you can, basically start from scratch. You can start, bringing up your shadows again and, working with your image that way. But, I think we're
And then
probably
Greg,
gonna
the other
cover a little bit more of that on the next show too.
Yeah, and Greg, also, I think if you didn't wanna do that, you can dial back on clarity and a couple other things to reduce the sharpness,
Yeah.
a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm finding I'm doing that a little bit now too
Yeah,
when I work
yeah.
on a Pro Raw file.
I don't think there's any right answer. Everybody's kinda taking their own path, but I think it's nice that we're all just discovering different ways of doing this.
Yeah, and No Fusion, it shoots live photos as well.
Mhm.
N Now it's a is it a one-time buy or is it a subscription?
You have the option. I think
Ye
there's a monthly and there's a one-time buy.
Yeah, I
Oh,
was
okay.
I wanna
actually
say it's
I
around
oh, I'm sorry.
around $30, is it, Dave?
I just brought it up, and it's either a lifetime for 30 or 1 year for $10, but you get 1 week free. And that's the pro version. So apparently, it looks like and correct me if I'm wrong, you do have access to use the camera. You just don't have access to all the features to use the camera. Like the negative film, the HDR, the custom focal length, the
You
volume
talking in the
button
free
control,
version,
the
Dave?
portrait mode.
Are you saying with a unpaid version?
With the unpaid, you don't get any of that.
Yeah, I think so.
So you basically you still can do a photo. You can still take a
Mhm.
photo, and I would still say, if you're interested in it, because you can still take and save a photo at full resolution. It doesn't say, "Oh, we're gonna let you take a picture, but you can only save it at, half resolution unless you pay us the money, or we're gonna throw a giant watermark over it." Might as well, you know, give it a chance to download it and try it out and see if you like it or not.
Here's my suggestion on that. Study the Reddit forums for a week or 2 before you buy it,
Mhm,
because it is semi-complex to wrap your head around the mechanics of this thing. At least it was for me. There's a lot of optimal settings that you need to go through, and the user in there that seems to have the most knowledge, I think his name is Isonian or something like that. But yeah, you wanna kinda get your arms around, the difference between shooting a negative film, if you shoot an HEIF plus, and Pro Raw. In order to do any editing to that photo, you have to convert it to negative film, and then you're able to, do some basic adjustments. Oh, and another thing that you can also do is there's built-in looks that are on there. So you can actually, while you're framing the photo, you can go through the different looks. You can also create your own looks, and you can also import looks. So I've got about 160 film looks. They're available for free from the Reddit forum. And I also built a Leica look that's phenomenal. So I can shoot a Leica look, with this thing at high resolution with the components of the Pro Raw that, I'm backing out of.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, it's there's a lot in that app that I have yet to really explore or at least figure out and be able to work, so that it's second nature. But yeah, so in the show notes, I'll have a link to the website, which I had on screen for a little bit, a link to the app itself in the App Store, and then I'll put a link on, there for the Reddit, the subreddit, and which I've gotta dive into too. I've said for a while now, I don't spend enough time on Reddit, and, there's a lot of good stuff on there.
mhm,
There's good stuff. There's good stuff. There's other apps too. But yeah, I would say, just make sure it's something for you before you spend the $30.
mhm.
You know, do a little bit of the research because everybody's coming on there saying, how do I do these settings? Once you grab the concept, it's pretty neat.
Yeah. It must be
I'd be
so
interested in
neat.
what people think. If you go to the podcast group on Facebook, just look at the side of that building. And to me, I think it's one of the best shots I ever took, and I was out of my car.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it must be so neat that Will's watching us in 3 different ways here. On his phone, on his iPad, and on his laptop, so thank you, Will, for the viewership. So, well, yeah, I'm not sure what else we can say about it just at this point because, we're still learning it and trying to figure it out and stuff, so, unless anybody in the chat has, any last-minute questions about this, but it is pretty cool. It is a cool app to play around with,
Mhm.
and I'm really liking what I see from it, and I'm really interested to see what we come up with it for the next show because I know there's at least one other app that can do this, but there's also other ways that we're gonna explore, to get around this over-sharpening thing. And, without giving everything away, some of it's some of the things that we touched on in prior shows. So we kinda dealt or didn't deal with it, but we kinda talked about it without really talking about it. But I guess, before we, start coughing our heads off here and everything else, I think we'll call it a show. And I wanna thank everybody for joining us on the YouTube channel. And I stumbled upon another Facebook group for iPhone photography, and It's a really good group, what I've seen so far. Very friendly people. I think some of the people are probably even in our own group, and it is called, I'm just trying to go in my memory here, something about iPhone 17 Pro Max. It's got a long name, but it's not just for the iPhone 17 Pro Max. They warmly welcome all smartphones, so if you shoot with an Android, everything's welcome as long as it's a mobile phone. But I'll put a link to that in our list of Facebook groups and things down in the show notes there. So, give it a look, and they're very welcome to help promote the podcast too. So that's another thing I really like about them, and they have no issues with that. So let's see, we'll just touch here on the last few comments before we go. How do I do? I use ChatGPT to give quick answers to my questions without having to scroll endlessly through millions of links. Yeah, that is a good way to do it, Will. I must
I don't
admit,
know if the information's all been digested. Probably by now it has been, but the information for No Fusion's been digested into ChatGPT. I'm assuming it has, where it could give you, at least it can give you enough to start with, but it's still also good to see what others have actually had hands-on experience with.
Yeah, it's gonna come down to the settings. I don't think ChatGPT is gonna be able to cover that, but yeah, I mean, it might be a start from the basics.
Yeah.
Wait,
Well, I don't use ChatGPT, so maybe I shouldn't say that.
But I'll say I did some questions about, okay, I have this image and I upload the image. How would I fix this in Photoshop? It gave me step by step by step inside of Photoshop how to do it. Now, I don't know if
Can't
they're
do it.
good steps because I don't use
Can't do it.
Photoshop, but it actually says, well, if you want to do this, here's the 5 different steps, and here's this, and I can write you a thing to do it in Photoshop type thing. So it's a lot more powerful than just spitting out stuff.
And Dave, if you ask it to give you instructions for the Photos app, it will.
Yeah.
It'll tell you what adjustments to make in the Photos app to get the look that you want, which is pretty cool.
It's also creating musicians that sound better than any other musician. So Dwight's sitting right here. ChatGPT's way over there. I'm a late adopter on that sucker.
Yeah. I use it for, to get ideas on things and stuff like that, but I certainly don't let it do my writing for me. When it comes to, whether it's, like I say, a blog post or something like that, I refuse to let it do that. But it has its use cases.
Mm-hmm.
And like Will says, that you could ask it a supplementary question. So yeah, you could actually have a contextual conversation with it. Even you having a voice thing talk back to you. But I've seen reels, or I don't have TikTok, but I've seen reels where this one guy will ask it something, and it'll say, oh yeah, it tries to, what was it? Something about, I don't know. The guy was trying to make it confess to something, and the guy says, yeah, but you can't do that. I don't know. It could be a little crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But, Will says, thanks for an informed conversation. Blessings. Yes. Well, thank you, Will, for actually, sparking our interest in this topic, because it was something that you commented on, or a post that you put in the Facebook group about, this over-sharpening deal here. And once you did that, I thought, yeah, that's going to make a good conversation for a show. So, thanks again for everybody for tuning in and for jumping in the chat there. When the audio comes out on Wednesday, check the show notes. I'll try to remember to put all the pictures in that we didn't show tonight, like Dwight's building that he just talked about a few minutes ago, and anything else. My memory will be jogged when I edit this episode. That's how I remember stuff.
And Greg, that sunset photo, that crunchy one I sent you, if you can really show that one, I mean, that's the ultimate crunchy, overprocessed HEIF.
Yeah. Well, yeah,
It's
it's
ultimate
really,
crunchy.
really crunchy in the background there. And if I zoomed in on that,
And look at the water too.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, where it's most prevalent for me is right along the horizon line. It's a kind of a high contrast place, but that's where the crunchiness really rears its ugly head. And you can see it
And right there.
closer
Important
in,
enough.
yeah, closer to shore.
Yeah.
Yeah, water just don't look like that.
No.
Yeah, so
Okay.
yeah. All right. Well, thanks guys for a great conversation. It was great to be back in the chair again. My arm is all healed up from before. That was part of the reason we took so much time off. It just seemed like anytime I sat in this chair at my desk, my arm would just throb. So it's all better now. Now we just got to get rid of our coughs and we'll be good to go. So everybody, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And I guess we'll see everybody on the next one.
Have a good one, everyone.
Enjoy.
Happy New Year.